Hey, welcome to this SVT Metta Dharma talk. And today we'll start off with a Namo Tassa, expressing our thanks to the Buddha and all the work that he put in and the legacy he left. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So today we're going to have a look at one of the suttas out of the Sutta Nipāta. And this is a lovely sutta. It's quite short, but it's got a lot in it, and a lot that is very relevant for us as practitioners in daily life, and around some of the difficulties and the challenges that we can have. So it's the out of the chapter of the eights, which is chapter 4, and it's sutta number 3, the Duttha Thakka Sutta, sometimes called the corruption sutta or the hostile sutta. But the way I like to think of this is as the way that we can live an inauthentic life. And that was an interpretation that came from my wife Sarah, who does a lot of work on the Sutta Nipāta, and I particularly like that interpretation. So it starts this way. Oh, by the way, I'm working with the Sutta Nipāta version from Saddhatissa. As you can see, it's quite a well-worn copy. It's one of our go-to references. Some people speak with malicious intentions. So here's the hostility part. So the title of the sutta is taken from this first line. And others with the conviction that they are right. But the sage does not enter into any controversy that has arisen. Therefore, the sage is free from all mental obstruction. So we're all familiar with malicious intention, either by receiving it or sometimes being in that unfortunate state of mind where we have the temptation or execution of having malicious intention ourselves. And this doesn't need to be some grand scale, of maliciousness. It can be just that inclination in the mind to kind of determine how a situation is going to be or how you're going to express yourself for one's own benefit, perhaps, or for the not wishing someone else to be successful, or we might be motivated by envy or greed or whatever. So this can work on a micro level, it can work on a macro level. And what we need to be honest about for ourselves is to see this process playing out, not only in our mind, but in the way that the world expresses itself at times. So some people speak with malicious intentions, and others with the conviction that they are right. Now, when we have that conviction, one of the things that comes across very quickly, and we'll notice in our practice of meditation, as well as in the expressions in daily life, is that we stop listening. We have this conviction that we are right, and the consequence of that is we're not listening to any possibility that that might not be true, or it might only be partially true. So in my own practice, I'm enormously cautious whenever there's a feeling in the mind of either certainty or satisfaction. I find that either of those two tend to close down my meditation, and the meditation needs to be expansive. It needs to have an open mind. And if we think of the English language, when we're open-minded, we're in the position of being prepared to hear different opinions, to look at things from a different perspective. And that is what we need. That's the mind we need in our meditation practice. If we simply work with the Brahmavihāras because they are a comfortable place to be, for instance, then we can rest in something that is wholesome. The Brahmavihāras of loving kindness and compassion, sympathetic joy and equanimity. The Buddha said, if you're going to be attached to anything, be attached to these, because they are the most wholesome states in samsara. But he said any form of attachment, even to these states, are an hindrance to the practice. So, when some people speak with malicious intentions and others the conviction that they are right, but the sage, and the sage here we can think of as someone who, in this context, is someone who's practicing with if you like, the open mind, the collected mind, as Brahmavihāras would describe it, not holding on to something, but listening to what is going on, seeing the movements of the mind from one mind state to another. The sage does not enter into any controversy that has arisen. In other words, they don't take sides around particular views, and when someone has a conviction that they are right, they're expressing a view. And usually they're trying to corral everyone else to agree with them. And the sage does not do this. Why? Well, because they understand that any view, in other words, any holding on to a concept, is itself a limitation in the mind. And the mind needs to open up. Now, we might say, well, what about the Dharma and the teaching of the Dharma? Are these not expressions of view? But what they are expressions of pointing towards the non-conceptual. So the aspiration in the Dharma is to move towards the non-conceptual, the place of no views. And so, if you like, the expression of the Dharma is not to hold that preference. Now, clearly the Buddha had certain preferences in the sense that he described sila, for instance, the sort of moral precepts. But these precepts are not commandments. They are expressions of what support the practice. He said, if you don't keep the precepts, you will see the impact in your practice. The development of the mind will not be there. Yeah? And so he gave every encouragement for people to see that for themselves, not to impose a view saying, you shall not do this, but to see that if the precepts are maintained, then there are benefits in terms of the development of the mind. And if they're not, then something different happens. So he put the responsibility back onto the individual, to us, to understand how attachment to views or dogmas does not help our practice. Therefore, the sage is free from all mental obstructions. So when we have a view, we defend it. And we tend to own the view. That's what a view is. And the Buddha says, remain open-minded. Look for growth. Experiment. His advice to the Kalamas, which were this society that lived at the crossroads of a major junction, and they said, when the Buddha was coming through, they said, what is it you teach? And we've got a problem here. And the Buddha said, well, what's the problem? And he says, well, every day a new teacher comes through and they claim to know the truth. Who are we supposed to understand? How are we supposed to understand this? And who are we supposed to follow? And the Buddha said, well, test it for yourself. Listen to what they say, apply it. If it seems to be of benefit and bring clarity and understanding, follow that. If it doesn't, reject it. But don't follow just because this person has said it, or this person's teacher has said it, or any other invitation to follow in an unquestioning way. Now, the Buddha did talk about creating faith, having faith in the Dharma. But that faith, the word for faith is Saddha. And Saddha has a multiple number of translations, and one is indeed faith. But the others are trust and confidence. And what the Buddha was saying is, follow practice, see for yourself. From what you see, begin to have confidence. From that confidence, you have trust in the teaching. And from that trust, you will build faith. But the foundation is from your own practice. And the Buddha said, don't simply take it because I've said it. Yeah. You must have responsibility for testing this. The person who is led by his impelling desire and continues according to his inclination finds it difficult to give up those views he adheres to. So the more we invest in our views and opinions and beliefs, the harder it is to change them. That's basically what we're saying here. And what we're being invited to do in the meditation is not pursue those opinions, views, and beliefs, but simply to see what is going on. To be the observer. And to observe in a dispassionate way. So observe in a way that we don't take personally. Now, this is a real challenge because we can have very pleasant experiences in meditation. We can have unpleasant experiences in meditation. We can have neither pleasant or unpleasant experiences in meditation as we can in daily life. And the Buddha was very careful to say you should treat all of these in exactly the same way. Don't hold on to any of them. Now, we can imagine how we might hold on to pleasant experiences. And he's saying, no, but what about unpleasant? Surely we don't. Well, we only have to reflect on the beliefs and opinions and views we have about ourselves, or the things that have been done to us, or the way our life has unfolded. And we begin to see that we hold on to the story that we tell ourselves and the story we often impart to others. How this person did this, or I grew up in that way, or those advantages weren't available, or if we're inclined to beat ourselves up, how I missed this opportunity, or I don't have the skills to do this, or all of these things. These are just the stories that are inhabiting in our head. And the Buddha said, look, this isn't going to help. This is another construct. This is taking our past experience personally and making it me. How much do we think our narrative is me? It's my own. It's myself. And the Buddha said, just observe. See what is going on. see how we construct these narratives from the khandhas. We have the khandhas, the physical body. We have a whole narrative about our own physical body. And for most people, the physical body seems to be in some way inadequate or failing or not good enough. Or we might be excessively vain and feel that, our body is something different to that. Or we have the feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. We only have to attach on to these and identify them for the craving to appear and the narrative to appear, and then our habitual responses to appear. Or we may be caught up in perception. And perception is all about the naming of things and memory. So we pull out from our past the memory and populate the present with it. Now, some things are very important. If we want to tie a shoelace, we certainly have to remember how we did that in the past. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the veil through which we view our current experience. And that veil is colored and obscured by our past experience. In fact, the neuroscientists now tell us that only 10% of the information coming through our senses is actually processed by the brain. The rest of what we see, hear, smell, interpret is constructed by the brain, is interpolated. So as we walk down a city street, we don't see the tall buildings and the rest of it. Our brain fills in our knowledge of tall buildings so that it works on the least amount of information, so it can actually process the things which we think are important right there. And so here's the brain using memory, past experience, to actually construct what it is we're seeing. And so on that basis, if we don't develop the capacities to see clearly for ourselves and direct our attention through the meditation to the things that the Buddha described as really important, we're always going to be occupying this place which is not real. It's fabricated, it's useful, it's how we go around and do all our daily life and daily work, but it's not the truth. So this is part of the delusion that we have. And the Buddha said, well, okay, given that's the case, what should we be doing? And he said, well, we need to look at the consequences of the way we see things and understand that an aspect of that leads to ignorance and not knowing. And he was very precise about what it was that we needed to know. We needed to see that things were impermanent. In other words, nothing stays the same. Nothing is reliable in its unchanging nature. Okay? Nothing has that unchanging nature. Nothing in samsara. Okay? That when we look for permanence in things which don't have that unchanging aspect, then that creates dukkha. And everything, because everything does change, has the capacity to generate dukkha, if you like, in our experience. It's not that everything is dukkha, but if we attach to anything, then that dukkha will arise because of that. And that these things are not under our control. And that any sense of personal self, and in Indian philosophy at the time of the Buddha, a personal self was really quite specific. It was a self which was unchanging, never harmed us because it was our true self. It was always going to be there to protect us, was not subject to variability, was completely reliable, all of these things. And the Buddha never declared whether there was a self or not. But what he did say is, given those attributes, look within your own experience and inquire whether you can find anything that has those attributes. And he says, when you do that inquiry and realize there is nothing that has those attributes in your experience, then you understand anatta. Okay, so those are the three marks: impermanence, suffering, and I don't like the word suffering. Dukkha is a specific term which means the consequence of attaching to something in the belief that it's unchanging. Okay, and that's what creates dukkha. All right, so that attachment, it could mean a feeling of dissatisfaction with things, or just recognizing the nature of the grabbing mind. So the tendency for the mind to want to grab onto the next thing. And if we grab onto the next thing, hoping that this in itself will be more reliable, then that we'll feel that expressed as dukkha. So we have anicca, that's impermanence, dukkha, and anatta. So those are the things which he says we need to address about ignorance. When we begin to address those, then we begin to see dependent origination. We begin to see that our attachment to things that are impermanent, feeling pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, our attachment to that is craving. That generates the story we tell ourselves about things, and that then promotes our habitual patterns of behavior and belief and all the rest of it. He said, when you begin to see these patterns, dependent origination, you're also addressing ignorance. And then finally, he said, once you've got a handle on that and you see the nature of dukkha, that it's potentially everywhere, but it only appears when you hold on to it, wanting it either to stay or disappear, because that's two sides of attachment. And then you recognize how to release from that. And the way you release from the dukkha is seeing the tendency to grab hold of things. And when you release away from that, and here we're talking about grabbing hold of views and releasing away from that, then you see that dukkha disappears, and that there's a path to developing that, which is the Eightfold Path. When you see those three groups of things, the three marks, dependent origination, and the Four Noble Truths, he said, now you're addressing ignorance. So we don't need to be able to process everything coming in through the senses, but the things that do come in through the senses, which make an impact in the mind, we need to be able to see them in this way. The person who is led by his impelling desire and continues according to his inclination finds it difficult to give up the views he adheres to. So the Buddha says, address this, because this is ignorance. Coming to conclusions of his own, he speaks in accordance with his knowledge. So having set up that framework, these are my views, this is the way he actually speaks about the world and about himself. Okay. And the Buddha's teaching is all about disassembling these individual frameworks. We've all got them. We've got them about multiple different things, multiple different areas of our lives. And whilst we inhabit the framework unquestioningly, we can't learn. If a person, without being asked, praises their own virtue and practices to others, or talks of themselves, the good say they are ignoble. Okay. So if we have a feeling of self-importance about what we know and understand, then, again, we're not growing. And what we need to maintain is this capacity to have a sense of humility. And what does humility mean? It doesn't mean running yourself down. Humility means understanding that we don't know all that there is to be understood. And if we don't know all there is to be understood, then any opinion we have can only be, at best, a partial truth. It can't be the whole truth because we don't know the whole truth right now. But we can have confidence about what we do understand so far, as long as we have the humility to recognize that we might have to revise that as we learn more. So we can say, in my opinion, with my experience, it seems to be like this. Okay? Rather than saying, it is this way, and it is not that way. So confident humility is a really important aspect of mental development in the practice. If we do not have humility, we are not teachable. And that might feel like an inconvenient truth until you reflect on it. If what's the opposite of humility? It's that arrogant knowing, which is, it is this way. And when we have that arrogance, we're not open to seeing a different perspective. And meditation is all about changing your perspective. And it doesn't matter how much you've done or how many retreats you've been on or how long you're able to sit or whatever other parameters you might want to express. If we don't maintain the humility, we don't understand that there's more that we need to understand and to see and to know. The calm, disciplined one who abstains from praising themselves for their virtues, declaring, "So I am." The good call them noble. In them there is no arrogance concerning the world. So here we have it. So difficult not to be pleased about our practice. But that being pleased is the thin edge of the wedge of satisfaction. And when we have satisfaction about our practice, we aren't looking for it to change. So this doesn't mean that we shouldn't feel energized by insights that might come through in our practice. Absolutely, we should. But we should see that these are stepping stones to something else. But if we pick up the stepping stone and carry it with us, as something that's mine, and that's where being pleased or satisfied with something can take us if we're not careful. Then we're going to, after 2 or 3 stepping stones, we're not going to be able to step forward anymore because we're carrying all this weight and we're just staggering around on the spot. So we need to make sure that the humility is there so that we can, instead of acquiring the experience in meditation, I've had this experience and I've had this experience and I've had this experience, and this is like holding the stepping stones. We are moving through in a process of relinquishment. What has my experience in the practice shown me, which has enabled me to let something go, to release away from something, not to acquire something? Relinquishment, from the Buddhist perspective, was central to the practice. one of the things that distorts or deludes us, the delusion that we experience, is because we've acquired views. We don't want to acquire more views from our own meditation. What our meditation should be showing us is the limitation of views. And it should be encouraging us to release views. Because the Dharma is ever present. But the Dharma is only present in the present. And the present, seeing the present, does not require views. It doesn't require views to understand it. It doesn't require views to observe it. It doesn't require views to explain it. Okay? But having said that, it's important in the development that we have both knowledge and vision. So vision is, if you like, what we see clearly in our practice. And then the Buddha described that, not in terms of fixed views, but in terms of a framework. And what you could argue that the framework is a view, but only in the context that the Buddha said, verify this framework, not impose the framework. So he described something and he said, let the vision come in and then see if this vision is consistent with this framework. If it isn't, get rid of the framework. That's what he told the Kalamas. And so he, in his suttas, described the framework, not as an imposition, not as a lens through which to look, but for a way of, from the clear-sightedness, to see if there's a consistency with this. Those whose views are mentally constructed, in other words, they're thought through, they're a process of intellectualization, yes, causally formed, highly esteemed, but not pure. Okay, so these are ones that, you know, and in our practice, we do need to be careful here. We can become intellectually flattered by our practice. Okay, so that's where the sense of satisfaction comes. And that's why I say, you know, because there are some times when in my own practice, something's manifested, and my mind is, that's what that is. I understand that now, you know. And then I've had to reflect back on that and go, hold on, let's just keep observing. And if we feel, you know, I understand that now. Well, the best way I like to think of that is like the skins of an onion. You know, we have a skin of an onion and it looks beautiful and perfect, and there's like slight blemish, and we just rub away at that slight, and all of a sudden we find there's another skin comes off there. Whatever our understanding is, it's like the skin of an onion. It's not the complete understanding. So by all means, the insights are wonderful. And then we need to go back and continue to do the work. So those whose views are mentally constructed, causally formed, highly esteemed, but not pure, views in which they see personal advantage. Okay, so that personal advantage might be the feeling of, you know, I'm meditating, you know, I'm better than, worse than, same as other people. Anything which is a comparison or a measurement. we've all been on retreats, I'm sure, where maybe the teacher has been explaining some aspect of the teaching, and then it's gone that little phrase where they go, and some of you have seen this, and then you go, oh my goodness, everyone's far more advanced than I am, and the measuring mind is just on and done its usual thing of and we need to come back from that place. One of the really inspiring aspects of the Buddha Suttas is that the liberating insight can occur at any stage. So the Buddha says, yes, there are these stages of development, called the jhanas, that we can go through. But he said, liberating understanding can occur at any stage, from the first jhana onwards. You don't need to go through them all. And so if we're caught up in the idea that, we've got to have these levels of experience, whatever, well, that's another view and another concept. Yeah? And we need to move away from views and concepts. Yes? Going through the jhanas and the stages of understanding and seeing those, they're wonderful. Absolutely. I'm going through the Brahmavihāras, and I'm going through from loving kindness and compassion and sympathetic joy and equanimity, going through the different levels of jhanas of seeing the body disappear, infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, neither perception nor non-perception. All of these things, they are real, they're states of mind. But of themselves, they are not a necessity for a liberated mind. They are developments of mind, but they are still conditioned states. And the liberated mind is the mind that experiences the unconditioned, the non-conceptual. And the Buddha said that's available at any of these stages, depending on each person's development. So those whose views are mentally constructed, causally formed, highly esteemed, but not pure. In other words, they haven't gone through the whole of the development of the path. Views in which they see personal advantage will experience a calm which is unstable. And so this is one of the seductive things around the meditation. We can have this acquisitional view in the meditation, and we can go through the stages of understanding, and we can develop calm and the rest. But this is not a calm that is stable. Because the calm that is stable is one that releases away from views. Okay. So we can work with the jhanas from a concentration point of view, where we're stilling the mind through concentration. And when we do that, the hindrances are temporarily suppressed, and we will experience the jhanas. But the suppression of the hindrances through concentration is not what the Buddha taught. And that's why with Bhante Viram's teaching of the collected mind, rather than the concentrated mind, we're investigating something different. There are suttas where the Buddha's disciples, young monks, have been often they would be in a large park, and there would be other sects with other traditions in the park as well, because at the time of the Buddha, the society was very supportive of those who had renounced daily life and were seeking some understanding about the nature of life. So these different sects would often be quite close together. And on one occasion, these young monks had gone to another sect, and they were just talking, and this other people in the other sect said, your teacher teaches about the Brahmavihāras, does he not? And they go, yes, it's the one. our teacher teaches about the Brahmavihāras. And your teacher teaches about impermanence, and our teacher teaches about impermanence. So what's the difference between what your teacher teaches and what our teacher teaches? And indeed, the Brahmavihāras and the jhanas and the theory of impermanence predate the Buddha. They were already well developed at the time of the Buddha. And the monks were confused, and so they went back and they went to the Buddha and said, recounted what they said and said, well, what's the difference? And the Buddha said, well, the next time you're asked that, you should answer in this way. And he went on to explain that, yes, we do this the same, that we do this, these are things. But the things that are different are the factors of enlightenment. And a key factor of the enlightenment is investigation. Investigation into the nature of things, seeing things as they really are, rather than simply developing particular states of mind. So you can work with the jhanas and you can take an attribute of the jhana, so maybe the joy in second jhana, and you can make that the object of your meditation. All right. And if you do that, you'll develop the jhanas in a different way to the way that Bhante Viramsī described. Bhante Viramsī said, don't concentrate on the factors of the jhana, the attributes of the jhana. You're using the jhanas simply as waymarks for where the mind's going. Similarly, don't use the factors of the Brahmavihāras as that. So don't get attached to the loving kindness, for instance. Now, the feeling of loving kindness can be very expansive and very beautiful. And as people practice on retreats, they will sometimes come in interview, and they will say, "Oh, I've lost my meditation. It's not working anymore." And you ask, "Well, okay, how do you come to that opinion?" And they go, "Oh, the feeling of loving kindness isn't there anymore." And it takes a little time to sort of ask them what's going on and to see what they say before you realize that, well, what's actually happened is their mind has moved from loving kindness to compassion. And compassion has a much less vibrant feeling about it. So the vibrancy of the loving kindness was there, and then the compassion is much more softer feeling. Yeah? And because they're holding on to the feeling of the loving kindness, an attribute of the Brahmavihāras, and treating that as that means my meditation is working, then they feel that their meditation is no longer happening properly. Whereas actually, it's developing as we would expect. So, those whose views are mentally constructed, causally formed, highly esteemed, but not pure, views in which they see personal advantage, will experience a calm which is unstable. The only stability to the calm is through the relinquishment, not through the acquisition. It is hard to go beyond preconceived ideas reached by passing judgment regarding doctrines. So we hear the suttas, we form a mental construct of what that sutta means, and then we practice looking for that construct, not simply observing. And so we don't see what's actually going on, but we filter our experience looking for what we believe should be going on. And this is the challenge when we read too much, for instance. So there are books out there which describe the twin practice, for instance, and some of it is in quite a lot of detail. But inevitably, it's one person's writing perspective of their view of what things are. And then we read it from our perspective and create our own image of what that is. And that image, in my head, may not be the image that the author had in theirs when they wrote it. And the difficulty is then I have this idea of what I'm supposed to be looking for in my meditation. Well, that's another view. And as I've said at the start of this, the meditation is about the dropping away of views. So we have to be very careful when we practice, simply to look after the conditions that set up the practice, rather than look for attributes of the practice. Okay. So it is hard to go beyond preconceived ideas, reached by passing judgment regarding doctrines. Therefore, with regard to these views, one rejects one and grasps another. So these views, as soon as we might as soon as we have some experience in the practice and we understand that, it's kind of like, well, let's bank that, and now what's the next thing, and what's the next thing, and what's the next thing, and this is the accumulation. We need to be very careful. Often we're invited to sit in meditation with the beginner's mind. Well, this is a wonderful phrase which shows us, don't sit down with the accumulation of all your past meditation. How many times have you sat down? I know I've done this in the past. Sat down and had, a wonderful sitting. Okay, and you get up and you think, the next time, okay, it's going to be like this, and you sit down with that expectation, and all you've got is a restless mind. So we need to sit down with a mind that is just observing, not holding on to past experience, not holding on to views, not holding on to who we think we are in the meditation. In fact, not even holding on to the idea of meditating. There's a lovely teacher he's long dead now, but a contemporary teacher called Alan Watts. And he used to have a lovely phrase which was, stop meditating. In other words, stop having the idea of meditating and just observe. Yeah. For the person with spiritual excellence, nowhere in the world do they have any mentally constructed view about various spheres of becoming. So let me just read that again. For the person with spiritual excellence, so let's just say they have a balanced practice. Nowhere in the world do they have any mentally constructed view. So that's concepts, views, beliefs about various spheres of becoming. So they don't have this constructed view about the practice. Yeah. As they have eradicated delusion and deceit, in what manner can they be reckoned? So when you don't have these views, when you don't have these perspectives, but simply work with this relinquishment, and you don't express in a dogmatic way a series of doctrines and beliefs and dogmas, then how can you be measured? It's like trying to nail water to the wall. So they have eradicated delusion and deceit. In what manner can they be reckoned? They cannot be reckoned in any manner whatsoever. So remember what was said in the first verse here. The sage does not enter into any controversy that has arisen. They do not enter into debate about that. Many people would come to the Buddha wanting to debate with the Buddha, having a firm view and wanting to sometimes trick the Buddha so that they could disprove what he was saying and all the rest of it. And the Buddha would always turn this back and invite them to see within their own experience. And he would say things like, well, before I answer that, let me ask you this. And he would try to get them to see where their own view had come from and how it was a construct based on belief rather than actual experience. Yeah. So he wouldn't say you are wrong. He would try to get you to see that your own experience contradicted what you were saying. The times when he would remonstrate against people were when people misrepresented what he was teaching. So the Sati, the fisherman's son, the Honeyball Sutta, is a wonderful example of this. Because here you had Sati expounding a teaching which was in contradiction to what the Buddha said. So in that situation, he first confirmed with Sati what he was teaching. And then he said, foolish man, when have you ever heard me say that? Okay. But this isn't a debate. It's a correction of a misrepresentation of the teaching that the Buddha had shared. Those who are attached enter into debate about doctrines. By what and how can an unattached person be characterized? They have nothing to grasp or reject. They have purified all views here itself. So basically, they're not operating from any framework. That's what the development does. Frameworks are based on views, opinions, and beliefs. So why would they then get into a debate about frameworks if they've moved beyond frameworks? It's simply not relevant. So, in summary, some people speak with malicious intentions and others with the conviction that they are right. But the sage does not enter into any controversy that has arisen. Therefore, the sage is free from all mental obstruction. So that's the end of the sutta. So let's just take a few moments. If you'd like to sit comfortably And one of the things that we need to do is set up the body so that it's, if you like, in as constructive a state for practice as we can. And one of the key aspects of the twin practice is the recognition of tension and how tension arises. So if we're sitting in a way which has tension as part of that, it makes it less easy to see the arising of tension. So one of the ways we can work with this, and this is how we work with the Sakita Yoga in supporting the twin meditation, is to recognize the usefulness of the energetic body for this. So just bring your attention below your navel, about halfway into the body. And this is an energetic center. Just give permission for this energetic center to provide the structure, support, and stability in your body. And then you can deeply relax into this energetic support. And you don't collapse. Now, allow your body to soften. And you can help this softening by a very subtle rotation of the inner thighs. It's a medial rotation. It's not a big movement, but that helps your hips release, your sacrum open, your pelvis relax. And you can drop the inner edge of the shoulder blades, not by pulling them down, but when you drop the inner edge of the shoulder blades, it's like a rotation of the shoulders, and you feel space all the way around your heart. You feel that space opening up. Now you feel your spine is free to move, but it's not collapsing. And then smile. Bhakti-Vimala really emphasized the value of smiling. When you smile, you change the chemistry in the brain. And you also notice that you're holding your head. And we hold our head when we're doing a thinking meditation rather than a feeling meditation. Let your head come back into balance. Soften around your brain and relax the crown of your head. And allow your meditation object to come up. Notice any attempt to make the meditation object clearer, easier, more defined, whatever. Just let go of that. No need. However the meditation object expresses itself, you might be using breath, or possibly more likely you're using in the Brahmavihāras. You can start off with loving kindness. If you're working with some of the other Brahmavihāras, the mind will rapidly move into those. So don't worry. And when your mind gets distracted, as it will, because it is the tendency of the mind to grab onto objects as they appear. So relax the grabbing mind. Softly smile. Come back to the object of your attention. And that is the 6 R's. The 6 R's are right effort. And they purify and retrain the mind. From a place of direct observation. Either seat on the chair, feet on the floor, or seat on the floor. Be aware of your breath. Take a deliberate breath in and out. And softly and slowly open your eyes. Okay, so any thoughts or any reflections? Yes, Pi. Okay, I can see your hand up, Pi. Feel free to speak if you want. So when you talked about habitual tendencies, we've got a message coming in. Yes. Is that the same as the reactive mind as opposed to responding? Okay, so this is a nice question. The reactive mind is very much the mind that is taking the pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral sensation. And remember that the sensation can come through any of the 6 senses: the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the tactile sense of the body, or as thoughts, images in the mind. It's when they takes any of those sensations and takes them personally. As soon as we take it personally, we have already triggered the process of the habitual responses. Because when we take it personally, we've got this identity. This is happening to me. And when we have this is happening to me, then there's a story that triggers. So Bantivan Ramsey would say, craving is this: I like it, I don't like it mind. I want it, I don't want it mind. And with that mind comes the story about why we want it or don't want it. And with that story, then comes all of the habitual responses around that story. So we notice this from our own behavior. We can get into a particular situation and we react, yeah, because I always react like this in this situation. So these are the habitual tendencies. So yes, the habitual tendencies are programmed reactions to certain stimuli. Yeah? And part of the meditation practice is to move that reaction into a response. In other words, not that we should be non-responsive to anything, but once we're responding, we're no longer reacting. And so we've no longer got the energy behind that reaction coming through. When the Buddha responded to sati, it wasn't a reaction of being angry. What he was doing is he was responding because the danger was that sati's view would then become the view of other monks, and that view was not going to help their practice. So he responded by calling him a foolish man, not out of anger, but out of compassionate concern for him and for the other people. So reacting and responding tend to be characterized by one of the elements, space. When we react, we tend to have no feeling of space. When we respond, we tend to feel we're coming from a spacious place. And that's why the somatic, the feeling in the body, is really very helpful. Because that feeling, and remember, the brain is part of the body. When we're reacting, the brain can feel like this, and our body can feel tense. Yes, we feel that there's a compression going on, not an expansion. Yes, and that compression builds tension, and then that tension expands perhaps as an explosion of anger, for instance, in the extreme situations. Whereas if we have that sense of spaciousness within us, there isn't a place for the anger to land. And anger needs tension to land. It cannot land in a spacious place. So reacting and responding can be a felt experience. We can see it in the physical brain, and then we can see it in the mind in terms of the feeling of crowdedness of thoughts, or intensity of imagery, or that. And generally speaking, it's an uncomfortable place. And the Buddha said, we need to be able to live with the uncomfortable. He said, if you practice this way, you don't just get sukha. Dukkha is still there. Feeling happens. Feeling is not a place that we can control. So the sensation in the body is not something that we can control. He sometimes would have monks who were, and indeed there are passages where he himself is physically ill. This is a deeply unpleasant sensation. So this is dukkha in the body, but it's not dukkha created through attachment. It's dukkha because of the nature of the body. So the fact that you could be in a state of non-craving does not mean that you don't feel dukkha in the body, but that you don't create further dukkha because of that. So we can have an unpleasant feeling and be in a responding state of mind to that unpleasant feeling. And there are passages in the suttas where the monks are so ill that they are distressed. And he comes up to them and he goes, how are you faring? And they go, not faring well. And he asks, is the pain getting greater or is it lessening? And they go, it's getting greater. Yeah. And and they say, I'm really distressed. And he says, what is your distress? He says, well, I can't get into the jhanas anymore because of the pain. And he said, don't try to. Basically, pain is your meditation object right now. And you should look at the impermanence of the khandhas as your practice. So you should see the arising of pain, it persisting, it easing, it moving around the body and things like that. So instead of going into the jhanas as your practice, you're looking at the body, you're looking at feeling, you're looking at perception, you're looking at the sankharas, the mental volitions, the mental proliferations in the mind, and the consciousness of these things. And this is your practice right now. So this is another example of where states of mind are not necessarily the arbiter of meditation capacity or what we should be doing in this particular moment. Okay, please let me know through the comments if I've answered your question or if you'd like to ask another aspect of it. Okay, so thank you. Good. And any other questions? Alok, how did you get on with the sutta? Any thoughts around that?
Well, I'm wondering when we talk about anahata, every time when we talk about not me, not mine, not myself, um, it- um, um, when there is a when there are sankharas arised after perceptions, um, sometimes it's hard to distinguish, um, thin line between, like, for example, if one is looking at all the skandhas, does one has to observe in a particular order, or just whatever comes shall be observed and let that go as well?
Yes, this is a good question. Um, there are different practices, but what I would say is that the most straightforward and the simplest way of doing this is simply to observe what's going on rather than direct your observation to some particular attribute. Because the whole nature of anatta will become very clear simply by seeing the process of moving from one mind state to another, which is what the invitation to be mindful is. Bhante Ramsey would describe mindfulness as the capacity to see the mind moving from one mind state to another. Okay, and this is and the process of meditation is remembering to do this, to remember to have this. And so what I would do in my own practice is I just become, as best I can, sensitive to the arising of tension. So I try to move through my life from a place of as little tension as possible. Now, that doesn't mean I'm avoiding things. It does not mean I'm trying to have an easy life and not looking to engage in things that are difficult. What I mean by that is I try to be, for instance, in the energetic body. So when I'm in the energetic body and moving around, anything that creates tension, I see reflected in the energetic body. So I see there's a resistance in the body. I see there's a sense of limitation, or I see there's a sense of pushing. And that then is something which I use in my own practice to bring me back to understanding what's going on in that moment. So rather than looking for everything, sort of a state of sort of hypervigilance, I try to keep a mind that's spacious and expansive. So Bhante Ramsey would call this the collected mind, so that I can see when things are changing. Now, that collected mind does not prevent me doing all the things that I need to do in daily life. And equally, when I'm meditating, the collected mind does not mean that I can't or I'm not meditating in a way which has purpose and intent. We must, when we sit down to meditation, we should have a very clear intention about what we're doing so that the mind settles in that understanding, and then just use our attention, so intention and attention, using our attention then to see how the mind moves and to be sensitive to tension. So I call this the three tensions: intention, attention, and tension. And when we set up the conditions that support that, we can set up those conditions in daily life, and we can set up those conditions in the formal meditation. And then we're in the position to be able to see movements of mind. Has that answered your question, Alok, or would you like to?
Yes, definitely it did help me. Thank you so much. Just a follow-up question with that. Like you rightly
Yep.
mentioned that when it comes to formal meditation, is exactly how you rightly mentioned how Banteji, tells us to have a collected mind. But at the times when there is a informal meditation during the day, when there are, one is running errands or just, making movements or walking, or sometimes in my personal experience, when I get up middle of night for whatever and for whatever reason, and when I go back to the bed after using washroom or whatever, my mind is very energetic and
Yes.
uh, and it's really mechanical. I find it that I'm observing one thing after another, and there is no objective, of course, because I wanted to, go back to sleep again, but that doesn't happen. And I feel that there is a like more of a mechanical process and less of compassion. And if you can help me understand, how can I bring compassion at that informal situations where there is a like too much of active mind? Yes, everything is being observed. I'm conscious. I'm aware of the mind movements from, mind moving from one state to another, but it's just very mechanical process. And then is has is very much of a wakeful state of mind that one there are times when I can't fall back to sleep.
Okay. So we have to be careful about what we mean by the observing mind. It's enough for you to observe that the mind is restless, not to follow the thoughts. If you follow the thoughts, you will give the thoughts energy. So if you go, oh, I'm thinking about that, I go, oh, I'm thinking about that, or I'm thinking about that. This will then give those thoughts energy. If you are aware that you're restless, then uh, it's like you're watching children in a playground at school. Now, you can go into the playground and you can kind of go, look, stop running around. Stop running. Look, please, people. Or you can just stand outside the playground and go, oh, here's the children simply playing. They've got 15 minutes, 20 minutes to get this energy out of them, so that they can then go back into class and be more focused. So you can kind of just observe your mind is restless and then ask yourself, am I physically relaxed watching the restless mind? So then you can go through your body and just soften around the tension in your physical body, the somatic body, whilst knowing your mind is restless. Okay? And sometimes the mind is busy and we can't and it won't settle in the way that we would feel comfortable about. So then we have to be present with the fact that it's restless and we feel uncomfortable, and then relax your physical body. If you relax your physical body, then you will be getting some benefit from the rest. Okay? Because you've let your physical body release. And your mind might be busy, but your observing mind, the eye of Dharma, the observing mind, is just holding that restless mind softly. So soften around the edges of the restless mind. Does that appear to address what you were talking about there, Alok?
Yes, yes, it certainly did. I really appreciate it. And just would like to add that um, so one is a restless mind that where one is analyzing which thought and following where this thought started and all of that. Um, I would like to clarify that I tend to observe that I do not engage in mind activity in that regard, but
Mhm.
just observing without engaging. When I'm talking about observing in informal meditation is by non-self, by observing that by not by anahata itself, that okay, in this thought there is not me, there is not this doesn't belong to myself, and there is no me, mind, myself. It's just that it's appearing and it's disappearing, it's appearing and disappearing, and that process of just observing that appearing and disappearing, rising and you know um,
Yeah,
yeah that sometimes becomes I understand that there is a very thin line between it becomes a restless mind, it appears as a restless mind, but it's like it's a very mechanical process of witnessing all of that process itself.
it is. You kind of, yes, you can see that for me, if I soften around the edges, then what I'm in the softening around the edges of the restless mind or an injury in the body or whatever it is, if when you soften around the edges, what you're doing from a somatic point of view is you're removing the tension, which is either the attachment or the aversion to what's going on. So if we're lying down in bed and we're going, oh, I can't get to sleep because of my restless mind or because of the thinking, then that's a subtle aversion to the state. You're expressing a preference for wanting a different state. You want the mind to settle down so that you can go to sleep. So then the softening addresses that subtle aversion. And then you can just, as you've described beautifully, observe it, the mind arising, persisting for a while, and then changing. But we need to address that subtle aversion because that's what gives it energy otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, I think I understood it. Yeah, you're right. There is a desire. I want it in a particular way that to happen, and that should not be there. I should let that desire go.
Don't have just here, there, the shoulds, the oughts, and the musts.
Yeah,
Don't have the shoulds, the oughts, and the musts. Simply let it be itself.
right. Nicely put it. Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. A lot. Good questions. Okay. Anything, May, you'd like to add?
I actually have a question. So I've been using like I call it like a kids version of the 6 R. So I kind of um make it easy to understand for kids, like the like cute form for my music students. And I also try to keep it secular. So like, as much as possible, no religious connotation or even spiritual connotations. And so I've been doing that for about 3 years now, and it's starting to show good results. As in, the students are the ones that are actively practicing that. So I have one girl, 13 years old, every morning, I mean, 5 times a week when she's on the bus to school, she does that practice. So not only has her music improved a lot, but also in school, She's surprised at how her maths has improved, her, studies in general have improved, her confidence improved. Um, of course, she does tutoring like a lot of other kids here, but she's not like stressed out, she's able to manage and stuff like that. So, and then I've been chatting about this with Bhante Dharma Gavesi on and off. And then recently I've started to use the five spiritual powers, which is like the Sister Kim, I used to call it FEMCORE, faith, energy, mindfulness, collectedness, and wisdom. But I fine-tuned the wordings again to kind of suit the kids and to remove any kind of, spiritual connotation except mindful, because thanks to the mindfulness movement, it's a term that people can accept. So I'm very grateful for that. So while I'm incorporating all this, right, and interestingly, when I'm doing this, and when you mentioned having that, the way I see it, it's like that childlike curiosity in us. So when I am sharing this or trying to, inculcate this in our lessons, I get questions from my students that just blow my mind. It's like some of these kids, like 10 years old and 8 years old, 13 years old, the questions that they ask to clarify further is like, it probably puts some adults to shame if. So then the thought occurred to me, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to train them to, achieve some kind of jhanas or whatever. That's not my purpose. My goal is really to, well, initially it was to experiment and see if this could help them progress in music faster. So I always use the reference that, this is based on neuroplasticity and blah, 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 and whatnot. So the goal is never to, want them to achieve jhanas and all that sort of stuff, okay? But then I got this question yesterday that came up. Great if they can practice a compressed version of 6 R's and let's say the 5 spiritual faculties, but if they don't keep the precepts or don't even know what that is, then they won't be able to, well, will they continue to be hounded by their hindrances? So yesterday I was mapping out, students that aren't progressing faster than others, trying to figure out what out of the 5, what are their hindrances? And it's so interesting, right? So for girls, for some reason, doubt is one of the biggest obstacles. And then I've got like a student sloth and torpor. It's way better now because she's practicing this, but like in the past, like I start talking and then within 5 seconds the mind's drifted. You can see in their eyes kind of thing. So then I'm thinking, okay, if I want to help them get past their hindrances, and I'll check back. I'm pretty sure in the suttas, I was going to bug Bhante and then I kind of like hold myself back. Like for each hindrance, I think we've covered that in the suttas, for each hindrance, like for doubt, we need to increase confidence. So my student is asking, oh, so if she's got sloth and torpor, right, what do I? And I'll figure that out, I'll find that out. But then my question is, how can I encourage them? Like, how do I teach them the 5 precepts without making it sound? And also the thing about the 5 precepts, don't talk about kids, yeah? The first precepts pretty much just chases everyone away. It's like, you're telling me I can't kill anything. We're heading into summer right now, and my student, she's so honest. And I asked her the other day, I was like, oh, which, season of the year do you like? And she's like, oh, summer's the worst. And I say, why? She's like, well, because everything comes out. We've got spiders everywhere and ants all over the place. Um, which is true. I have an ant problem right now in my bathroom. But what I'm trying to get at is when I was thinking of the 5 precepts, right? And I'm going, the first one's a big challenge. The second one might be easier. And I think, in school, kids are also taught, like you don't steal people's stuff and all that, right? the third one, I think someone talked about how, I can't remember, but please renew my memory, like how we're gonna customize the third one for kids. The fourth one, yeah, I think so. The fifth one should be easy because anyway, they're all, below 18, so they can't, be taking alcohol anyway. So, but how do I, how do I relate this in what shape or form so that it can complement very much to, let's say, the 6 R's and the five spiritual powers, and yet not come across as totally absurd. Like, when I first started sharing about all these, right, I was doing it very timidly. I was like, how do I, what if their parents go, what kind of a music teacher are you? I'm paying you to like teach music, So I was kind of like walking on eggshells like the first 1 to 2 years, like testing out, experimenting, testing out. And after about 3.5 years, now I'm very confident, partly because some of the parents are starting to see the change in their kids, not only in their music score. So, I mean, my students all get like A's, A pluses, distinctions and all that. That's fine. But they're also starting to see the change in the child in terms of school performance, etc. Right? So even in the recent recital I had with them, I gained the courage to like speak about it, in front of everyone. And my students were so cute because I had no time to practice myself, and they all wanted to see me do something, right? So then I was like, oh my God, I really don't have time to practice. This is nervous. I know y'all. And so I compressed the 6 R's into what I called, because I was thinking of something cute, and I call it the three burps, as in brain preparation steps, but with acronyms like that. And literally what I took was take the 6 R's, but just pick out the simpler stuff. So I just like asked them to think of because like I was thinking, oh, if I tell them to think of loving kindness, tough. So I said, okay. Think of a happy thought. And I have this 6-year-old boy. He's happy thought. He's got full living room of soft toys, but the one thing that makes him feel happy, nice, comfortable inside is his little blankie. How cute is that? So anyway, when I was at the recital and I was like, oh, I'm so nervous, my students said that formula back to me. And so when they were so confident in repeating that, and I could see that they were practicing it confidently, that was when I also confidently said to them, well, now my challenge to you is to practice it as a family with your parents, right? So coming back to my question again, how do I start to devise a way to encourage the five precepts? Otherwise, wouldn't they be continuously like cycling around their doubt or sloth and torpor, or am I
Okay.
overworrying?
So just repeat again what you said you were inviting them to do within their own family, and I'll start from there. Just pick that last comment up.
Okay. So the 3 steps would be that they need to have a happy thought, and then relax their head, because the relaxed step I could not remove, and then to smile. So instead of 6 and having that loving kindness as an object of meditation, I just compressed it pretty much, but kept the essence as much as I can. So literally it was just doing the happy thought, relaxed head, and smile repeatedly, very quickly, because we don't want to get them stuck in any single step. And so what I use is and another one of my previous students gave me the idea, like a washing machine. So I used to tell them, imagine like you put a teddy bear into your front loader and turn it on. You see the teddy bear going round and round and round like that. So you want to do your happy thought, relaxed smile. But because Sister Kema used to say there is that retraining of the mind and then the repurification of the mind. So what I do is I then remind them that the happy thought, relaxed smile in itself is not enough. So once they get that going, that momentum going in their brain, and they can do this with their eyes open, they don't even, then once that momentum is built, then I say, don't forget, then you need to talk to your brain like a 2-year-old, which is what Sister Kema taught us. And initially, because I think I was a little bit hesitant and timid in my delivery, the results that came back weren't, there were some results, but it was slow. So then I started to have a bit of doubt. But now when I get a little bit more confident in my delivery, and as Sister Kema said, one of the things we need to be prepared to repeat exactly the same instructions again and again and again and again until they get it. So when I start to get more confident in my delivery in that, then I realize that their confidence also in the practice also increased.
Okay, so what did you ask them to do when you said talk to yourself like a 2-year-old?
So here's where I use the music as a tool, because music is ideal. So a music score is made up of notes, but it has a lot of repetition. So music is designed in the way to have a lot of repetition. So whenever they have problems with a certain section of the music, and then I say to them, well, do you know how to fix it or what needs to be fixed? So the thing about the brain and this skill is that knowing what needs to be fixed is not the same as doing it right on the keys. And they realize it now. And so when they are using this process, and I say to them, you need to tell your brain what is the right thing to do in this particular bar. And usually I ask them to tell me what they tell their brain. And then, they could use like generic terms, and then I'll say, that's not good enough. I'll say, imagine you telling what you just said to me to a 2-year-old, the 2-year-old will just look back at you blankly. And so then they start to get the idea, so I need to be very specific, very detailed in what I'm telling my brain about what I want to do. And very, very simple format. And time and again, the moment they do that, and I guess because they're kids, I don't know, maybe their brains are fresh. Time and again, when they do that, bam, immediately. It's like even they get surprised initially, like how quick their brain just turns around, just rewires.
Okay, so give me an example so I can get that image in my mind. So they're looking at a particular bar maybe, or a couple of bars, and they're not quite getting that right. So what will they tell themselves? Will they say, I've got to use what finger to use where? Are they that constructive? Okay.
Yes,
So
to very detailed, yes. That's one example. So there are many different types of situations, yes.
okay. So what you're dealing with here is the quality with which they speak to themselves.
Yes.
Okay. So I think the way in to the precepts isn't through the precepts themselves, but through right speech. And if you look up the right speech in the suttas, it's about saying it at the right time, in the right way, for the right
Yes.
purpose,
Yes. We covered that
for the right
recently.
benefit.
Yes. So I'll go through that again. Okay. I
Yeah.
get you.
Now, and then you can start saying, and then you can say, and how do you talk to yourself in your daily life? And how do you talk to others? And then you begin to bring in the qualities of the precepts
Okay.
without trying to address.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I didn't think of that, but thank you. I'll start to
And so
experiment
that
with that.
addressed the issue about the insects as well, because how are you talking to yourself about this insect? This insect's really annoying me.
Ah.
You know, And then you begin to see that you are expressing from a place of annoyance or perhaps fear if you know the other things are coming in. So they begin to own where they're coming from in their relationship to the insect. Are the
Gotcha.
insects trying to annoy you? No, they're trying just to be their own thing in their own life.
Yes. Yes,
So
yes,
then
yes.
how can you both coexist?
Yeah. Okay, very useful. Thank you for that. I
Okay.
will go and listen back to that sutta again and do some homework. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and you please either do a little podcast or write this up because because I'd be very interested to hear in more detail what you're describing.
It's super fun. It's getting really fun this year. So because I'm a lot more confident in the delivery, right? And also I'm curious myself. So like you say, I have to be, initially when I started, when they ask questions, probably I'm blocked by my own view, whatever, I don't know. My answer to them is usually quite like snappy, like quite blocking, like quite it's because you are da 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 da. And then I realized, wait, hang on, why am I so judgmental? They're just kids. And the good thing is because they are kids, the next week they forget everything, which is great. So, which is brilliant, which reminds me that I need to practice like that every single day. But what was I trying to say? Yeah, so it's getting really fun and interesting. It started to get fun and interesting earlier this year when my students started telling me what they see is happening to them, not only in the music practice, but in their daily life. And then they start to get excited themselves. That's when it got a little bit easier, and that's when I got excited, and that's when I started to get more confident in my delivery of things. But whenever I speak to them and whenever I speak to the parents, I'm always coming from a perspective of I teach this in I use neuroplasticity techniques. I mean, I don't think anybody has time to go and Google and see if this is in some neuroplasticity research somewhere. So far, no one has come to dispute. When that happens, I'll come running to you guys for advice. But it has been really, and I think it's only this year that things are starting to get really interesting. So I have to remind myself, I have to be in collaboration with each of them. So I cannot be coming from I know more than you because I have done X amount of meditation more than any one of you. So I have to remind myself that.
This is exactly the same when you're teaching meditation and when you're doing meditation interviews. If it isn't a collaboration, if it's just didactic teaching, it
won't work.
No.
It won't work.
No. You're connecting with the movements of their mind.
Yeah.
And that's what's really important because that is actually the reality they're experiencing.
Yeah. And I have to keep reminding myself that they are kids. So quite likely they're telling me the truth about where they are at. No.
Rather than what they think you want to hear.
Correct. Because one of my students, I've been testing him a little bit because I am an empath and we all are at different degrees. And I think he's one as well, but his mom doesn't understand the concept. So he's struggling a little bit. So I'm trying to help him. I call it yesterday. I said to him, we need to try and restore your energy. You're depleted because every time I go and see him, he's tired for a 10-year-old, And this child has so much potential. So anyway, in the past, when I first started teaching him, I didn't understand him because I didn't know he had those qualities, because I didn't pick it up. And it's so odd because I myself am one, and I've gone through most of my life being misunderstood and all that pain. And here is one in front of me, and I couldn't even see it. And honestly, misjudged the poor boy. I did apologize to him and gave him a big hug after that. Um, but the thing is, when I realized that I had to be really mindful when they are giving me answers, that I have to be really listening to them.
Okay.
Like
Let me
word by
just
word. Yeah.
say something at that point. When you're really listening,
Yeah.
make sure that that is a mind that's doing this and not
Okay.
doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, it's getting really fun.
I think you've got something very, very helpful to share here. And I just encourage you to find a medium in which you're comfortable to share it in. Because yeah, this is Dharma in practice.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But the challenge, actually, initially, for me, the challenge was, how do I take all these terminologies and concepts and make it into something that kids can understand? But then,
If you can do that, it will be a lot easier for adults to understand as well.
well, kids have less baggage, so it's a little bit easier, actually. That's why I
Yeah,
like
yeah,
working with
yeah.
kids.
But I'm talking about the simplicity of language, the direct applicability, getting the immediate feedback so children are connecting to it. These are things that adults need as well. One of the challenges when you're interviewing people on a meditation retreat is they're coming in wanting to please the teacher.
I have a student like that. Initially, I think he's borderline. So, okay. So I read a book by Dr. Judith Orloff. So empaths and narcissists are two sides of the same coin, believe it or not. And there's a reason for that. Anyway, I think he's has that little bit of a narcissist. I'm not saying he's a narcissist, but I'm saying he's developed a bit of that narcissistic quality. Every single lesson, I feel like he's trying to, I had to take some of Dr. Judith Orloff's tips to put him where he needs to be. So sometimes for such people, I learn a lot from Bhante Vimalaramsi. You kind of, I find I have to be like harsh, but with the intention of compassion, right? We for their own good. But it can only work though if the student has full trust in the teacher. Otherwise, they run away straight off and maybe complain to their parent, go, this teacher is nuts. But yeah. Yeah, it's been fun. But I've also had actually, the more I start to be more confident coming out with the delivery of this sort of thing, right? The funny thing is, those that can't accept it run away. Literally, I have students going, thank you, but I think we will stop the lessons now. But then it's fine because the universe will answer, and then I've got others on waiting list right now. So yeah, here we go.
Yes, you can't have a preference, but you can help and guide and ensure that your intention is in alignment, and encourage them to recognize that their experience is the valid experience, not trying to make the experience into something other, and that their experience has value and truth in it. So, for instance, in your environment, making mistakes in the music has something to show you.
Sorry, can you repeat that
So,
a bit?
if they're working on a particular piece and they're making a particular mistake time and time again, there's some interesting information there. And the information is, like you've been describing, well, tell me what you're actually telling yourself about this piece of these couple of bars.
Oh, I didn't think of that before. Gee, I just missed a whole big part. Okay, more homework for me. I will go and do more homework.
I think you've been talking about this, but maybe not in those terms.
No, I skipped that because I was too, it's like a 45-minute lesson. Okay, show me whether you can, that kind of thing. And then we're all like exams, deadlines, blah, 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 right? So I kind of skipped that whole investigative part and go, let's fix it. And it works. So let's go. But yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, I'm glad I asked this question. Thank you so much.
And and please think about the way you can share what you've discovered, because it's something that I could bear wider appreciation.
Okay. Right. There's another group, a lady that I'm quite close to. I mean, not say that, but we have the same mindset, and she's asking me. I spoke to her about the 6 Rs because when I was talking to her about how I teach music, and she got interested and asked me to prepare like a kind of presentation to ladies. We're part of this women's network in data analytics and AI, and a lot of people are distressed right now with AI and stuff. So I did speak to Bante about this, and he passed me some slides from Sister Kema, but I haven't had time to like put a secular, I need to, I've got these tips on how to deliver a presentation so that you hook. You know how people do TEDx talks nowadays, so you got to do it in that kind of format. Otherwise, people like death by PowerPoint, they call it. Anyway, Alok, I realized poor Alok has his hand up for quite some time, so I think he has a
Well,
question.
we'll pick up with Alok just in a moment. Just to say that you come across right now with enthusiasm and with energy. So you don't, you could just record yourself talking about this like in this way. It's
Uh, okay, but yeah, I'll need to refine that polish a little bit.
uh the confidence to be imperfect is one of the things we teach in the Sakita Yoga. It's
Mm,
don't look to polish it.
mm,
In the
okay.
rawness, there is also energy and truth.
Mm, okay. Anyway, that's my Christmas project. When work dies down a little bit and then I get some time. That's
Okay.
literally, it's
Well,
my
thank
Christmas
you, May,
project.
for sharing, because that's a really nice expansion of the practice. We can get too focused on the suttas and formal meditation and all this, but it needs to move out into daily life, and it needs to be
Yeah.
relevant.
Now more than ever,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
the number of kids that are, I don't know about the UK or India, the number of kids that, especially teenagers that are in distress, whatever form of stress, whether it's due to peer pressure, studies, parental pressure, I don't know what type of pressure, is just, um, yeah, it's,
I
yeah,
think teenagers now have such a high expectation of themselves as well. They're
it's,
bombarded with all the presentations of what it means to be successful, or what it means to be attractive, or what it means to be, and it's an extremely noisy place.
yeah. Anyway, over to Alok.
Yes, indeed. Alok, thank you for being patient with your hand up. What would you like to ask?
Well, something really related. I really enjoyed what May has been doing. May, much love and energy to you, to your lovely
Mm.
work. And this is really good suggestion that you might want to read. Maybe think of podcast or any format you would like to. So me and my sister running a school for, disabled, especially able kids. And we've been thinking for long to start something like this, mindfulness practice for them. We do not have any problem with the spiritual aspect or using terminology like precept, because in India it's quite common to have that. It won't be judged or taken otherwise. But this work would definitely help us adopt something for our kids. Maybe any suggestion or any volunteering would help. in this regard to start,
Yeah,
especially for deaf and mute kids, not autistic or mentally challenged kids, but for deaf and mute kids, it would definitely help us,
ooh, that's a different area. But we can take this offline. I'm happy to like have a short discussion and chat further. Um, none of my kids have none of my students have learning disabilities. I've been quite lucky in that area. Only one who's an empath, which just means he's a whole lot more sensitive. But yeah, we can, send me I'll pop do you have my number?
Yes, I do. I will write. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
great.
Okay,
And
well,
yeah.
let's hope this is a fruitful collaboration, and I'd be very interested to see where it goes. All right, so thank you so much, May, for organizing these sessions as ever. It's been a delight to talk to everyone, and perhaps we should close now with the closing prayer. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty birth, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much indeed, May.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week. Keep smiling. I tell my students, smile even if you don't feel like it, because that's what my late teacher said to us. He said, I don't care if you feel like smiling or not, just smile.
Okay, and thank you, Alok, and thank you, Pai, and have a good weekend and next week. Bye for now.
Bye.